Welcome back, everybody, to the Marketing Rules podcast. It is my pleasure to have Sean Galligan from TA Guru. Sean, it's great to have you on board. It is really good to have someone in your space because there's not you're few and far between, and I know we're going to kind of talk about that a bit more today. But before we crack on, maybe you could give our listeners a little bit about your background and how you come to set up TA Guru.
Yeah, thanks obviously for having me on this show. It's great to be here. I suppose my background is maybe similar to a lot of people who end up in recruitment in that I did a business degree in college, didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up beyond being a professional footballer. That hasn't happened yet. And I sort of fell into a recruitment company. I suppose I consider myself lucky in that I fell into a niche technology recruitment company where there was a lot of focus on sort of building up the sort of knowledge and skills that you need to sort of succeed. And I worked with some like leading brands and companies in that technology SaaS space across sort of Ireland, but Europe sort of wider. And that was sort of my background for a number of years, sort of working in recruitment and sort of growing my knowledge and so on and so forth there. And I suppose TA Guru sort of came out of sort of that experience and sort of both my own as an agency recruiter, but also then working with internal talent teams in some of these technology companies. And the recognition that I suppose recruitment, particularly in the technology landscape and other sort of highly skilled areas, is a very challenging role where there's a lot of knowledge gaps. Recruiters like myself typically don't come with a background in the roles that they're recruiting for, are given these roles with various terminologies and technologies that they have to sort of like learn and upskill on, and not really given that support to sort of like actually develop that knowledge and sort of grow from there. They're given sort of recruiting, I suppose, support in terms of how to run a recruiting lifecycle and build those soft skills, but the sort of harder knowledge they're not necessarily sort of supported on. So yeah, sort of as COVID kicked off in 2020, we decided to sort of pursue this idea that been, I guess, filtering around or in our minds for a little while, and sort of built out this platform, TA Guru. And what TA Guru really does is, I suppose, focus on giving recruiters the knowledge, content, and insights to sort of help them do their job a little bit better. And that's sort of across that recruitment life cycle. So it can be anything from sort of supporting initial client intake or recruitment manager calls through sort of sourcing onto sort of candidate engagement, marketing, so on and so forth, and then sort of the actual process bit towards the end of it as well. And I guess like we're working with a number of companies, I suppose, on the enterprise sort of technology side of things. We do work with internal talent teams and sort of build bespoke sort of knowledge playbooks for them that sort of help them understand how they hire and sort of the content and assets they need to sort of hire for their company. And then equally on the staffing side of things, we have a sort of more generic help desk solution that sort of closes some of those knowledge gaps as they sort of constantly context switch between different clients and different role types and so on and so forth. So yes, that's sort of where we're at the moment.
And I guess TA Guru sits in that now kind of very familiar term that some we might is recruiter enablement. Is that where you guys sit?
Yeah. So recruitment enablement is what we would call ourselves as a recruitment enablement solution. And as you sort of mentioned at the start of the podcast, it is a growing space, but not one that has too many players in it. There's a few, likes of Adam Gordon, Joe Atkinson, who are sort of doing different work within the sort of same field. But we sort of took that term and sort of ran with it based on things like sales enablement and revenue enablement that were terms in sort of technology companies, where these companies had recognized the need to support those sort of employees with the sort of relevant knowledge and content to sort of help them do their job that bit better and sort of be more informed, so they could then let their soft skills sort of shine from that point, but have that foundation underneath them. And we sort of think that logic can apply equally to recruitment. I guess the difference we see at recruitment is that compared to sales organizations, recruitment teams are typically smaller, so the investment may not be there to sort of have a specific sales enablement or recruitment enablement team the way there is for sales enablement teams in these large companies.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting space, and I know we're going to talk a little around it as we kind of go through today. But we're going to kick off with something we don't actually do huge amounts of. With being that this is a marketing podcast, is actually talk about marketing and this kind of new concept in recruitment, the company, and how this all kind of now fits together. So maybe you can kind of kick us off.
Yeah, and I suppose like it's certainly been a challenge in our sort of developing our go-to-market for TA Guru and sort of bringing recruitment enablement as a concept to the market. Like there has been, we're still really at that educational stage of trying to sort of help customers or prospects understand what recruitment enablement is and the value that it can offer. And because particularly, as I sort of stated, it can sort of span that recruitment life cycle, some of the things we've learned is maybe to narrow that focus and sort of focus on specific sort of pain points and use cases and sort of use that as a, I guess, beachhead and then sort of grow from there. I guess equally because we sort of have those two customer profiles, we would often use sort of different language. So like the staffing agency side of things are probably a little bit more bottom line driven, and it's very much focused on productivity and cost and everything else like that, and sort of looking at those hard sort of metrics and ROI. Whereas maybe some of the larger sort of technology companies or enterprise that we would work with are a little bit more aspirational, and that's sort of where you're talking about sort of uplifting your recruiters to become talent advisors and sort of helping them be that strategic resource for the company and developing these assets that sort of have this longevity and value over time. So we're still sort of working through and iterating through like lots of trial and error. I guess like some of the things that have worked for us is sort of trying to lean into that thought leadership. So we worked actually with Adam Gordon on building out a maturity model for recruiter enablement, which I guess is just signposting the companies and sort of agencies where they might be in their journey and what needs to happen next. Not necessarily with us, but I suppose to adopt recruitment enablement as a sort of philosophy. And then equally sort of just trying to come on things like this, put out blog posts, sort of discussing the topic. And then a lot of it is just like reaching out and I suppose trying to have those initial conversations. And it's a lot of networking referrals, like trying to create advocates within the company, sort of have that champion and then sort of sell from there, rather than sort of reaching out straight away to sort of the top exec. You sort of typically have to go into somebody who may be a little bit closer to the pain and help them understand how you can fix it and then sort of work with them to sort of sell it through the rest of the company.
It's an interesting kind of dilemma, or not necessarily a dilemma, but an interesting position you kind of put yourself in, which isn't too dissimilar to my business at ThinkinCircles, where you're working with the kind of recruiters and recruitment agencies, and then you're working with direct employers as well. And as you said, there's a different kind of almost go-to-market strategy, and there's a different messaging, particularly.
Yeah.
How have you kind of squared that circle? Because you're one brand with two very distinct audiences with two very distinct needs, and you, as you said, you correctly identified. There's the the recruiters. We could maybe accuse them of being maybe more kind of quite sales focused and bottom line focused, and whereas the TA teams and the internal teams are much more kind of maybe a bit more kind of, I don't want to say forward thinking, but maybe a bit more kind of open. And has less that kind of pressure on them.
Yeah, I suppose like for the sort of staffing agency side of things, it has been sort of around our messaging and sort of the assets that we use. So we have sort of built like revenue calculator that sort of helps them understand the savings or the potential savings that they can make. A lot of what we still have to do involves sort of like pilots and stuff like that. So I suppose when we're building out mutual action plans for the staffing agency side of things, it is all around sort of those quantifiable metrics of recruiter productivity, sort of time to close, all that sort of hard recruitment metrics. Whereas I suppose if we're working with a company on an internal talent team, there probably is a longer life cycle, so they mightn't see those direct results over time. So that's more around, I guess, a softer, I guess, appreciation of, is this working? What are you uncovering new insights and sort of helping us set up a structure that's going to support our team over time? So, like, to be honest, we're still working on it, certainly. But I think it is just the framing and the focus when we go to each different type of customer, whether that's in the sort of language we use, but then also how we sort of work through a sales cycle with them and sort of go through a sort of pilot scheme and everything else.
And I'm going to put you right on the spot here, right? This is going to be a bit of a difficult question, so you can feel free to avoid it. Do you have a favorite? Is there a kind of is there one what you would kind of who you favorite for whatever reason that might well be?
Like probably the conversations that maybe are, in one way, they both have sort of benefits. The staffing side of things, you reach typically a quicker outcome. They either sort of see the value and sort of buy into it and sort of are willing to give you a chance to sort of make those savings down the line. and you sort of can run through a cycle with them relatively quickly. So it's maybe that little bit shorter. But I guess the conversations you would often have with some of the internal talent teams are maybe that just bit more dynamic, and you sort of are posed questions that you really do have to consider, and sort of figure out, one, can you sort of actually deliver on what's been asked, and also then you start getting ideas back from them around sort of like your product roadmap and everything else. And we do have slightly different solutions for the two sort of customer types. So as I said, the sort of staffing side of things is a little bit more generic. It's based off sort of a help desk sort of function with a core library of assets, and then sort of AI to sort of generate answers from that. Whereas for the enterprise customers, we more create bespoke knowledge for them around sort of their own hiring patterns and stuff like that. So there maybe is just that bit more, there's more effort on the enterprise side for us, but also you do end up sort of uncovering really interesting things, and sort of things that when you go to a customer, you sort of have those wow moments as well during like a sales cycle, or sort of in those initial sort of first few weeks where they're like, we would have never seen this in our own sort of analysis that we're getting from an ATS or wherever at LinkedIn Insights or whatever else it might be.
Mm-hmm. A very politically kind of like correct answer there.
Yeah, democratic.
But I tell you, one of the things that's interesting around the kind of similar products and recruiter enablement is the kind of enablement of individual kind of recruiter marketing. Right?
Yeah.
Can you kind of describe that and tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, and so like sort of as I mentioned, like we definitely see enablement having a function in supporting recruitment marketing, and I suppose we've already kind of broken that down into how it supports the individual recruiter, and then how it can support the company. And I suppose to begin with, on the individual recruiter, it's about empowering them with that knowledge. So I suppose helping recruiters be knowledgeable enough that they can start to build rapport and trust and confidence with the candidates they're trying to reach out to. So they're able to talk about the sort of areas that they're recruiting on a relatively surface level, but have some appreciation of what is going on in that sort of domain. Equally, what's happening in the market in terms of what companies are sort of growing, what sort of trends are sort of appearing. So as bad as it sounds, it's not just recruiters putting up pictures of them in an office with a champagne bottle or whatever it may be. Some of the sort of fluff you do see on LinkedIn that helps build a brand around recruiters probably, but doesn't build a brand with the actual candidates that you're trying to reach out to at times. So that's where we see a lot of sort of support there, is helping them sort of build their personal brand by having the right sort of knowledge and then content assets to sort of post out and sort of engage with sort of candidates on. And even sort of we've seen some sort of use cases around hosting events and stuff like that, where they would have used our solution to identify a topic and some sort of, I guess, leading sort of trendsetters or champions in that space, and then sort of set up an event from there and sort of moved that out. I guess on the company side of things, some of it is around that sort of centralization of content and sort of creation of content assets through that sort of funnel, whether it's an AIDA funnel as a business graduate or the recruitment sort of life cycle. And sort of for a company perspective, giving them that access or that confidence that recruiters have access to the right piece of collateral at each stage of candidate engagement, and also sort of confidence that they're using a consistent piece of collateral. So your employer brand is just that little bit more secure, that, you know, like a recruiter is not sort of going rogue and sharing a different sort of link or article that you're not quite as sort of confident on, or sort of creating their own sort of assets that maybe don't have that polish that you need. So it's helping to break down that recruitment lifecycle, identify what the assets are needed at each stage, and then sort of having that centralized hub that recruiters are able to just pull on as they sort of move that candidate through it. So that's sort of where we see it largely at the moment.
And this kind of difference between the kind of the agency recruiters and the internal kind of TA teams, I know you've described a little bit on the kind of on the different things that are within the platform, but is there a different way that they use the platform as well, and what the kind of and the way they want to engage with it?
Yeah. I suppose like the nature of agency recruitment is that little bit more reactive typically. So that sort of, they sort of come into the platform when there's that immediate need there, and sort of look for and sort of instantaneous response. So on the knowledge generation piece, that's sort of relatively simple. When it comes to things like personal branding, that can be sort of where, again, we're working with our sort of customers and our users to sort of educate them that it's about building this sort of brand over time and trust over time, that it's not a one and done. You put out a piece of collateral on LinkedIn around AI and suddenly you're known as an AI recruiting expert. You have to sort of identify what is the niche that you're looking to target, who are the sort of audience that you're going after, and then sort of create a marketing plan. So with them, it's probably, again, a little bit of an education, sort of hand-holding customer success exercise. Typically, the internal recruiters probably are a little bit more sophisticated in how they approach the recruitment marketing and probably have some employer branding guidelines. So for them, it's looking to probably refine what they're doing already and create sort of that consistency throughout. And I suppose even in terms of, I guess, like it's going that layer deeper. So it's moving from a very generic sort of employer brand and content and collateral around that to sort of going, well, what can we start creating that's reacting to what's happening in the market? So is there a competitor who's laying off staff that we should maybe start to create some content or sort of start creating some outreach around? Is there a particular trend in sort of our space as fintech that we should start addressing or have some of our leaders address? One of the big things that I sort of believe in terms of, I guess, recruitment marketing is the importance of humanizing a brand. So I suppose what we always sort of suggest is, even if a recruiter is not comfortable talking on a particular topic, somebody in your company should be, whether it's your chief revenue officer, whether it's your CTO. Maybe you're not going to be able to quite pull them down, but you'll be able to find somebody that you should be able to either get a quick video from or a podcast or whatever it may be. So yeah, for the internal teams, it's probably taking them from some of that static employer branding content and helping them move to that sort of more dynamic stuff as well, where they can react to what's happening in their sort of specific ecosystem.
And interesting, you've mentioned kind of personal branding a couple of times, and I can see the positives of having a tool like this for kind of guidelines and do's, don'ts. Here's some stuff that you could share, etc., etc. Do you find from the clients that you're working with, and maybe even anecdotally, and maybe some of the kind of like empirical evidence, that there's more of a need for more of a willingness for impersonal branding within recruitment agencies or within the kind of direct employers? I know you've already mentioned that direct employers are probably a bit more kind of sophisticated anyway, so they've probably got a bit more knowledge. But is there one place where it seems to stick more than it does with other?
I think they probably both need it, to be honest. Like it's largely individually driven. Like you see some great people at it from both sides, I suppose, of the talent world. But I think it's probably recognizing that like it's personal branding, but it's, I guess, business specific or sort of career specific. It's not just like LinkedIn obviously does have an algorithm that supports sort of sharing personal stories, and there is space for that. But alongside building that audience, which that will help do, you need to sort of build expertise and sort of trust with that audience. And for that, you need to sort of be putting out the right content in your sort of domain. So I think it's helping recruiters probably recognize that they need to sort of step beyond sort of, putting up some of their personal stories, holiday pictures, success pictures. Nobody really has a problem with that, but sort of supplementing it with the sort of actually role specific marketing as well. I think for what we've seen probably on the agency side of things is that like there actually is quite a big appetite, and it's more that they're maybe just not quite sure how best to approach it. Maybe that's the nature of people who are in agency. They're typically at the start of their career, want to sort of like build that brand, maybe are more sales orientated as a sort of person type. So they're willing to put themselves out there, but I think they just need that direction on how best to do it and how to actually apply it. On the internal side of things, they probably have that little bit more of a network and maybe feel they can rely on the company to sort of provide the marketing for them. But I still think it's important when you're an internal recruiter to sort of continue nurturing your own sort of talent pool and your own sort of network, and not just sort of reposting what's being posted by your company and sort of adding one or two lines sort of saying whatever best place to work. Like having some of your own sort of input and your own thought leadership, for want of a better word, is really important as well.
Yeah. And almost the same question around employer branding, which you kind of mentioned a couple of times. Is there a place where you find that it's naturally sitting within? Obviously, hopefully, you would imagine that the internal teams have some kind of grasp of employer branding, although we know there are many that don't. Or are you finding that the recruitment agencies are now starting to pick up on this, and they've taken a bit more interest in this, and they're starting to kind of run with that as either something they want to talk about from themselves, just have more knowledge of, etc.?
Yeah, definitely on the agency side of things or the staffing side of things, we've seen that little bit more appetite. I think, interestingly, they're doing it from two angles. They're doing it both around their own sort of company and sort of advocating for the recruitment services they provide and sort of candidate experience that they provide across clients, but also they are sort of taking clients' collateral and sort of reworking it or reimagining how they can do it in a more sort of maybe generic way if they're trying to be sort of coy about who they're working with, or sort of talking about a domain that they sort of have a number of clients working with it within, and again building that credibility within it. And then really interestingly, one of the things that we've seen is working with internal talent teams who have recruitment partners, and they're using our solution to sort of, I guess, push out what they want their employer branding and sort of recruitment marketing collateral to be. So as these recruitment partners, be they RPOs or agencies, are engaging with candidates on their behalf, they're also being supported by the content within our platform that sort of is company approved and sort of aligned to where the candidate is within that journey. So that's been a sort of interesting new use case that we've seen. But yeah, I think agencies are recognizing that like they have to, in the current market particularly, do that a bit more. Like it's a game of inches for a lot of these companies. Trying to sort of stand out is incredibly hard. So they're all looking for where they can improve. And definitely, I think employer branding, both for agency perspective, but also representing clients, is really important. And it's not just a case of do you want a job anymore. You have to be doing a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Seán, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. If anybody wants to know more about yourself or TA Guru, we're going to include all of your details in the show notes. So I encourage everybody to check out the website, get in contact with Seán, and find out a little bit more. But for now, thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks.